mango tree is probably 85 years old. They live to be like 300 years. The hot tub, I put some salt additives in there to make it nice and soft, the lavender shit, and dumped it like 3 times over a couple of months. And I didn't even think that it would harm the tree. I didn't think about the tree. Of course, salt is not good for a tree, for the mango tree. And so it skipped like 2 years and didn't make any mangoes. This year, the mangoes are back. This side of the tree seemed to be dead. It would not produce any mangoes. Still hasn't. And this side, I mean, it's got a freaking crap load of them. I mean, they're just everywhere. And they've been falling for weeks. I mean, we're swimming in mangoes, cutting them up and everything, right? So tons of mangoes, and they're very tasty. The best, Heather says, the best mango she's ever had. Okay, so half the tree has mangoes on it. And this side of the tree, for a year or two, the leaves look really dry. They didn't look very healthy. This side seems to be unaffected, right? And so we got a good harvest on half the tree. Then I started putting some feed into the tree, about $60 worth of fruit spikes. And we're watering the hell out of it. No more salt in the hot tub, so it can't affect it. And all of a sudden, in the last week, the side of the tree that was very unhealthy has now sprouted all these new extra leaves. And it's just on the side of the tree that looked like it was dying. And there are some mangoes on this side, but not nearly what this side of the tree has. And they're all the way up to the top. And so I just thought that's kind of cool. This side of the tree came back to life in a big way. You can see up close, I mean, this is the old leaves, and these are all the new sprouts. And they got a really weird oily texture to them. It's kind of neat. And these are the old leaves, new leaves. And they're sprouting right at the end of all the branches. And there are baby mangoes on this side of the tree, and they look a little different than the other mangoes. Some of them seem to be like those two right there. See those? They look like kidneys. And we're getting those on the side of the tree that probably took the heavy load of brine salt. But these mangoes are normal. But, I mean, they are just off the chart on how they taste. But it's a special tree. And it just happens to be the tree where I was sitting right there a few years ago at 2 o'clock in the morning, talking to the Coast Guard, texting them. And in that big trunk, there's a hole on the other side of the tree. And I guess I'll tell that story. I guess I was kind of ramped up, telling them I was doing calculations, and they were looking for 2 men where the boat capsized. They're giving up the search that night, and I did the math on it, and I figured out they were about 75 miles off. And I recommend they go back out because they didn't account for the Gulf Stream. I'm sure they did, but when I calculated it, they said he wasn't that far out. But I mean, they're only off like a few miles, but nobody knows where they really were out in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. And so, you know, guys, they don't stick to their float plans. And so if they went out a little bit further and their boat capsized in the water, he would have been all the way up to, he would have traveled about 300 miles. And there's other stuff I know about that story too, that I got information from my sources. But the crazy thing about it is that I was sitting in that chair and I felt my shirt being tugged. Something tugged on my shirt like 7 times. It was 7 times. And I thought it was my dog, Abby. She's a cur, which is a hunting dog. And she's never grabbed my shirt with her beak and yanked on it. And I thought that was kind of weird, but I was really caught up in the conversation and I didn't even want to turn around and look. And so 7 tugs on my shirt. It was low, up by my waistline. So I didn't think it was anybody tugging on me. But then I got, in a rapid succession, 7 baby punches in my lower ribs. It felt just like a baby fist. Hit me kind of hard. I mean, not hard enough to hurt me. It was like a baby punching you. So at that point, I freaked out. I thought the house was on fire. And my dog, she's pretty smart. Doesn't seem like it, but I know she is. And she's, I thought she was just being extraordinary and trying to get my attention. And that's a Jamaican cherry tree over there, by the way. That's something you want in your yard, right there in the middle of the picture. It blooms. It gives you berries year-round. So many you can't pick them all. So I whipped around and I was looking at what people call a garden gnome. It was a real creature. It was an old man, about 16 inches tall, and had a white robe on and a sorcerer's hat, one of those tall, pointed caps. And the robe was really thick and oversized, a little bit oversized, like all robes are. And I didn't notice any other details like his shoes or anything like that. But I looked at him and I looked at its fist, and I looked at there's like mica sparkles in his robe, all through the robe. And I didn't see a speck of dirt on him. And on the other side of this mango tree is a huge opening. I guess that's common with big mangoes. And if you try to put a basketball in there, it would fit, yeah, but it would, you'd get that basketball would be dirty because it's dirt in there, and the tree is dirty inside the hole. So he didn't have a speck of dirt on his robe. And that was the first thing I thought about when I looked at him. I'm like, I imagine he came out of that hole because he was right by it and he's right behind me. He was only about 5 feet away from it. And when I turned around, of course I was surprised and wasn't taking any substances at all. I mean, I take kratom tea for chronic back pain, but that doesn't cause you to hallucinate ever, no matter how much you take. And I don't do anything else. I don't drink or anything. And he took off and ran around a tree and he jumped in the hole. He did it so fast I couldn't. By the time I got up, he was already running. But he kind of looked like he was riding a bike. I mean, I don't think his feet were touching the ground. It might have been, but he didn't make any noise when he did it. He didn't make any sounds. But I saw it and I felt it. So I picked it up with 2 senses. So that right there tells you you're not hallucinating. I mean, if you hear something and see it, you're not hallucinating. So he took off. And it was a little old man. Looked like he's about 85 years old or maybe 95 years old. I mean, it was ethereal, but it was definitely solid as I am, because I felt those punches and I felt my shirt being tugged. And I've never seen it since or before that. And I've been at this house since 1985. Look at this little mango. Wow, it's colorful. It's amazing the colors that are in mangoes. I'm taking that. I gotta wait for these to start falling. I mean, it's amazing how they just fall you know, like 3 a day. I mean, it'll start speeding up in a while, but we can keep up with it and cut them up. I like to cut them up and freeze them. Oh, we got a lot of them. So, yeah, that's my gnome story. And I've never been into gnomes. And so I looked it up on Google, and every gnome has a sorcerer's hat. That's the way they come. And evidently, I've seen pictures of what I saw on there. And evidently, there must be other people that are having these experiences too. I mean, people don't like to talk about gnomes. I don't like to talk about it either. I mean, you're way past Bigfoot. People can't get their mind around an ethereal Bigfoot creature coming from another dimension. They're not ready for gnomes. But I watched it and I looked at it and I felt it. And it was definitely something that happened. It was a real event. I was by myself. I didn't have a witness. But, you know, I don't make up stories. Everything on my channel is real. You don't have to make up stories. You go out in the bush, you go looking for stuff, you're going to find it. And that's my gnome story. And there wasn't a speck of dirt on his robe. I think he had black boots on, like shiny boots. I can't remember. I can't attest. I couldn't attest in a court of law that that's what I saw, but I could with the robe and the wrinkled up skin, his tiny little baby fist. And I don't know why he would have punched me like that to get my attention. Probably because I was sticking my nose where it didn't belong, and I probably could have enticed the Coast Guard to go out again, and they probably could have got lost. Maybe it was a bad thing I was doing by sticking my nose in their business. Or my other theory is that because they come from a higher dimension, that I was actually matching frequencies. Kind of like a car going past you at 200 miles an hour. You're going to see a blur. You're going to think you saw something if you didn't hear it. And only until you would get in another car and drive at the same speed would you be able to pull up next to it and reach out and touch it and see every detail, every speck of dirt. So what I think would happen is I was matching frequencies for that brief period there, and I was in my own little dimensional bubble sitting in that chair. I was facing the backyard away from the tub, and I actually thought my house was on fire. And I'll tell you, a house fire is no joke. I had one like a year later after that. Damn near burnt half the house down. Power strips in your house. People have them that are 20 years old or more. They're old. They're sitting on your floor sometimes. You got to get them off the floor. You got to get them replaced. You can't have old power strips. And I had a couple things plugged into it. And we had a tornado come through the backyards here. Came right through here and caused all kinds of damage. Broke my nice copper pyramid you see right there next to my shed. Big tree limb fell on it. I mean, everything I owned was in the neighbors' yards. And I got that on video, actually. You can go on my YouTube channel and go further down and you can see the short video of I was actually filming it. I knew something was coming. I knew the power lines were going to fall too. You'll see that in the video. And the last storm we had too, I predicted that too seconds before it happened. That these power lines, the 10,000 volt line at the top, that single primary, that line snaps right over there if a tree falls on it, like that big oak, and it'll drop that wire right into the backyard and it'll kill everybody. So made sure nobody went out in the backyard. Anyways, off track, but that's my gnome story. It's an actual real thing, and other people are seeing them, obviously. And that's just another ethereal being that evidently, from my sources, I got lots of sources through the veils, they come from the 7th dimension, just like Sasquatch does. Not all Sasquatches are ethereal, but most of them are. Probably out west in the deep forest, you're going to have some physical ones. But, you know, they're ethereal like any other entity that's outside of this plane, like extraterrestrials. They're only physical when they come here. Their ships can come and go, vanish. and reappear in another spot when they're trying to chase them. And they are only physical when they come here. Look at those 3 mangoes. I cannot believe this is late blooming mangoes. I mean, what are those gonna be like? And look at the, I can't zoom when I'm in cinematic mode, but if you look at the stems on those, they're kind of unique. So, I've been wanting to share that story, and I saw it. That's just something else I've seen in my life, and I've seen most of the things I've seen. I've had witnesses with me, so you know, I was matching frequencies. That's obviously what had to have happened. And when you communicate with the beings on the other side, like guides, there's all kinds of different ways to do it. Lots of people are doing it these days. I'm not going to go into that. But right at the base of this mango tree is like 7 years ago, I purchased a little gnome set, just for decoration. A little table, it's like Barbie doll furniture, and a little door against the tree. And Spirit on the other side said, sure, gnomes are real. You want a gnome? You want a gnome family to move in? You invite them by putting those little items up against a tree, any tree. And evidently it opens up a portal. And I didn't have any indication that I had any tenants until that event happened. And when we do spirit communication, I asked my guide Veronica, I said, what's up with the gnome? I said, why is there a gnome in my backyard in Pinellas County? How come I haven't seen him deep in the bush, out in the woods? She said, well, you invited him in, and we talked about that years ago. And when you invite them in, there's things you have to do that I found out later. You have to give them offerings like milk or honey. And you put it in a little tiny bowl, like the size of a thimble. You know, it's just, I guess, your intentions. And, but once you invite them in, you have to keep doing that every couple of weeks. You have to, and if you do that, good things happen. One of them is, she says they're like little children, even though if they're like an old man and woman, she goes, they will act like spoiled little children, like 3-year-olds, and they will break your stuff and break glass. And we had a lot of glass broken because I wasn't keeping up with it. I mean, everything glass I got was either tipped over, knocked off, or the twine broke and my lamps fell, all kinds of weird stuff. And when you do give them their little offerings, they make good things happen. I'm starting to see a pattern with that. I mean, I'm still investigating that part of it, but I have no reason to doubt it because my source, Veronica, she's just always on point, never told me anything out of 800 hours of communication. And there's all kinds of different ways you can make connections with the other side. That's something else we'll go into later. And, maybe he was mad because I wasn't putting his offerings out, but I think it had something to do with the frequency match. And, you know, when you see these things, you see these things. And if you're in a low vibration, or if you're upset, angry, unhappy, you're probably less likely to have an encounter. And she said the best time to have these contacts is after or during she used the word fold, which is the in-between time, morning and dusk. I asked her, I said, well, what exactly time is that? She said, well, you'll know when it's the fold. It's right when the sun is setting and you can still see. She says, start taking pictures. You do that enough, you're going to get something on your film. And so I did. She says, well, you got lots of pictures you haven't examined close enough. You do have evidence of these entities. So, but that's the whole point. That's one of the major points of me making this video was this tree and these mangoes, which are interesting, and the matching of the frequency. And a lot of people are able to do mind speak with Sasquatch because they meditate. I don't like to meditate, sit there in the woods with no rifle or handgun, and especially with all the things I've seen. But you know, if you're relaxed and you're meditating and you're making that connection, a lot of people are reporting communication or even sightings, interactions. You don't want their pictures taken and all that. And at the time, I didn't have any security cameras facing the back here, and I got actually 2 full security systems now. So, you know, something happens here, hopefully it's going to get caught. So I'll have video evidence with it. So, but that's something to think about, you know. Get yourself a little gnome setup. Put that against your tree in the backyard. Put your little milk or honey. She specifically said those 2. Put them out and invite them as tenants. And just keep up with it. Every 2 weeks, give them their offering. And it'll make good things happen in your life. And I'll probably do more reporting on that because now I don't keep up on the offerings, but I have been lately. And yeah, so we'll see what comes of it. But my mind was reeling that night talking to the Coast Guard, and I was in my own little bubble and I wasn't really paying attention. I mean, there could have, you know, car accident could have happened out front and I probably would not have noticed it. I mean, I was so deep in that conversation. I mean, I was trying to save these guys with what I dug up. And so somehow I was in the right spot, right time. You know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, well after the fold period, but she said that's when people get most of their sightings is during that period. But 2 o'clock in the morning, I had the interaction with it. I know what I saw, and I know it's ethereal. There's nothing living in that big tree underneath the ground because there wasn't a speck of dirt on that robe or his hat. And he moved so fast. I mean, it was like a greyhound when he took off. I mean, it's like, I mean, that was supernatural when I saw that. I knew it was ethereal then too when I saw that. But there would be dirt on his robe if it was an actual physical being. But he took off, and I mean, he probably could have vanished without running around and making it look like he jumped in the hole. I didn't see him actually jump into it, but why would he run in that direction around the backside of the tree? And but that's what I saw, and yeah, it's embarrassing to tell a gnome story. It's the only one I've seen in half a century, and it's probably the only one I'll ever see. Kind of freaks me out though, you know, sitting in a hot tub at night by myself, you know, never sure if you're gonna look over and he's gonna be peeking over the top of the tub. But doesn't bother me now. I'm over it. Kind of like seeing a child ghost, not something you really want to look at. But haven't posted in a while. Figured I'd post something. I didn't start out to post this on my channel. It's just for my son because he's you know, he's got a nursery, online nursery. But I haven't talked about the gnome story yet. I probably mentioned it a couple times, but that's something people need to hear. And you know, a lot of you know my credibility. I'm not going to make up stories. I mean, if I'm going to make up stories, I'll make up something else besides that. I mean, it was a real thing that happened, and you know, hey, what else is real out there? You know, we've seen things we haven't talked about yet with witnesses, and you know, what I've said for years, if there's groups of people all talking about the same thing, even if it's unicorns, you know, people are probably seeing unicorns. I hope everybody is doing very well, and I'm signing off.